G'day, mates. Welcome back. Alster, he's got the new haircut. He's got the new gallery. He's a blue man on Sorare. He's a blue man in person. Mate, the long looks are gone. It's a new you. It's a new Alster in 2023. But look, I mean, first week of the new strategy, and it didn't play out too bad.
Look, not too bad. It was certainly a week of have I just made the worst decision of my life? You know, for those who didn't catch last week's ep, I have sold all of my rare cards.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
And I haven't done a complete rebuild from scratch, but I've basically kept all my super rares, and I'm kind of going for a new strategy. So, as with any major life decision, there's always those moments of
I'm totally
okay, I may have done irreversible damage here, but it worked out okay. It wasn't the best weekend for me, but we got a couple of wins on the board. I think I'm not quite out of my slump yet, but I'm slowly dragging myself out of that pit.
What was the bigger decision, mate? Was it the decision to cut off the 3 years of growth with a new haircut, or bringing in the Blue Boys on Sorare?
3 years of growth on Sorare, all down the drain. 3 years of growth on my head, all down the drain. I don't know which one was more painful, to be honest. I think both my long hair and my rare cards were both causing me different amounts of grief in my life. I needed a fresh start. And what better way to do that than making a significant financial decision?
Times like this when I just want to throw my hands up and say, let's take drugs and go crazy.
And also changing the complete appearance of your face.
If you go and buy a Lamborghini, then I know you're definitely having a mid-30s crisis, but at the moment, it's okay. But, I mean, it kind of worked out. I mean, like you said, it was nothing too exciting, but your main reason for getting into the super rares was the Cap 240. Was it 300 Australian dollars if you hit it? And, I mean, Claudio Bravo, he did his best to ruin it for you, but you did hit the threshold.
I mean, 300 Australian dollars doesn't go a long way on the weekend here. But yeah, look, I hit the threshold. That's a little nod to any of the night rats of Australia.
The $20 vodka raspberries.
That's it. Hit the threshold with 4 guys, basically, which is always nice. Bloody Claudio Bravo.
What have you done for me lately?
Letting us down. But hit the threshold, and look, I mean, if I'm buying a Lamborghini, it means that the strategy's working. So, fingers crossed.
I was just going to say that, I mean, if you look at it, you've got $300. How much is that in ETH? 0.1?
I think it's about 0.1.
Now, and then you compare that to my situation, and I've discussed in recent weeks, I mean, I might possibly be the greatest Sorare manager of all time.
I hope it doesn't sound arrogant when I say that I am the greatest man in the world.
After possibly the worst 2 years where I basically won nothing, the start of 2023 has been amazing. It's just constantly pulling in rewards. I mean, nothing incredible, but tier 3s, tier 2s, can't complain. I think I've finally discovered that All-Star is just impossible. You can have your lowest score being 70 and then get one bad score, and you end up with I think I only barely held on to a tier 3 in the end.
Yeah, it was a brutal weekend. I think lots of people had big scores. I don't know if you saw the guy who came first basically scored 540 points in All-Star Rare. He almost got a perfect score. I think he was Unastore got 85 instead of 100, but other than that, it was all hundreds across the board. It's tough, man. Ajax smashed, Feyenoord smashed, Zenit I think did pretty well. All the big boys got big scores, so super hard to compete. But yeah, your decision, and I mean, for those who have been with us since the beginning, we used to be an MLS only podcast, and I think we switched out of that because we were like, there's just too much heartache here for us on the weekends, and for you especially, it's been a great move. So Rare's finally paying the bills.
Absolutely. I mean, just the knowing the consistency of those guys that even on their bad weeks, they're going to get you 60. It's not going to kill a lineup. And ironically, the one guy that killed my lineup was Sebastian Gerisi, arguably one of the best MLS cards you can get. So go figure.
Yeah. I think seeing your results this weekend really kind of made me feel a lot better about my decision to go purely super rares. Because if I had the same 5 players as you, and they scored the same, except one of my guys scored a 45, I'm still doing very well out of the weekend. Whereas for you, anything less than a dark green, and it's tier three or worse. So you've really got to be perfect if you want the big guns.
And especially given that I've had an incredible run of clean sheets from Joe Willis. Like normally, unless you've got a top tier goalkeeper, they're not going to be keeping clean sheets on the regular. So I mean, it is extremely hard to get even high tier 2s, let alone tier 1s, and I mean, just forget stars. I think for me though, it is really nice just having that constant stream of cards coming in. I think we sort of touched on it last year, was when you're not winning and a player's out of form, or aka your 35-year-old goalkeeper does his Achilles, you've got no way of bringing those pieces back in. And that's when I was finding I was doing a lot of like sideways trades, trying to catch people on the market, which never really works. Whereas now I feel like I've been able to accumulate ETH, I've accumulated cards, which I can sell on. And now I'm at the point where once Europe ends, I can actually make some moves and I've got some leverage.
Yeah, exactly. I think we all know how tough the market is at the moment. It's very hard to sell things. Prices are very low. But if you're winning, then, you really are setting yourself up well for, fingers crossed, touch wood, the future where prices start to go back up again, demand starts to pick up, potentially around the beginning of the next European season. If things all go well, that demand will be there. And if you're sitting on a pretty hefty kind of gallery, whether it's, you've got a good chunk of ETH sitting there, you've got a good depth in your gallery, then now is the time to be winning for sure.
My one point, we'll touch on your All-Star Super Rare because this is where I'm sort of leading to, but I'm kind of at the point in the moment where I've got some consistent guys where they're not necessarily going to win me tier 1s and stars, but consistently I can be expecting tier 4s, tier 3s on most given weeks. Now, for me, do I just keep yielding that until the end of the European season, keep harvesting those mid-level cards, or do I try and make the step up now while I can, the last little window of Europe, and make it into a kickoff super rare or a all-star, a rare pro competition? Or do I just be happy with what I've got, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it?
Look, I think you've got to make that move up to Rare Pro. I actually think that the super rare kickoff, even though everyone kind of mocks it and, week after week, PSU fans are saying it's the worst competition on the platform. I kind of like that. I hope people keep thinking it's terrible because it's actually relatively easy to win super rares in. And the thing about super rares is, even if you win a tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 super rare, you never know what's going to happen in that player's career. And if they hit a patch of form or they move to a club where their situation is better, all of a sudden, that super rare is super valuable. So I think the next step for you should be to try and pick up a good super rare, not just kind of get one for the sake of it, but try and get a really solid super rare. And we'll go through a few of these kind of, what to look for in a little bit later. But I think if you can get a really solid super rare to go with those really solid pieces you already have, then you've got a good chance of picking up some super rares in that competition, moving forward. And maybe now is the time to do it because it's coming to the end of the European season. Maybe you pick up, a quality European super rare and just try and, really focus on that until the start of the MLS, until the end of the current European season. Because I think trying to do it in the off season, you're relying on your MLS and your agent cards again to do the business. And as we know, that's not a good business strategy.
Yeah, I think the strategy that's worked for me so far this year is, look, I'm buying Nicholas Otamendi at the back end of the season, but the plan was hopefully that I would win enough cards between now and the end of Europe to help fund me and try and add some stability across my American lineups. And it kind of has happened. And the plan was for America to go into American Rare Pro. And look, at the moment, I'm kind of on track. If I can pick up some good valued super rares, I'm on track to do that. Because, I mean, we'll look at your lineup for this week. You still ran your All-Star Rare Pro. Great scores across the board. I think a bit hard done by. I don't know how you're not kicking up more of a fuss about the fact that Kieran Trippier, I'm sorry, was clearly robbed of an assist. I still don't understand how that is an error led to goal from the goalkeeper.
Yeah, that was tough because normally when those that kind of like what you think is a clear and obvious Opta error, you go on Twitter, everyone's kicking up a fuss. No one seemed to care about it. Everyone's like, basically I was just shouting into the void. I think I put a tweet out being like, at Opta Joe, what's going on with this? Surely this is a goal and not an own goal, blah, blah, blah. And I think it got like no likes, no retweets, no comments. No one gives a shit. So I think, I had a little bit of hope over the weekend that maybe they'd change that and then I'd get a nice little Opta surprise. But I think, unfortunately, I'm just going to have to let that dream die.
Which is a shame because if he had gotten that assist, I mean, his scores would have been up into a dark green and you could have been well and truly on.
We love them dark greens. It was a week of kind of, almost, but not quite. So, but promising signs. Going back to what you were saying, I think I'd like to know, like, is your plan? You got some ETH under your belt. You got some ETH up your sleeve. What? You've got some players there. Is your plan to try and consolidate that into some solid American options for the off season, or do you think you might be better off placed by taking advantage of the kind of cheap European prices right now and picking up some like proven crushers? Because the European season starts again in August, and I think the Euro qualifiers are on in July, so potentially you could pick up some quality and only have to wait a couple of months before you can use them again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. Like, I mean, my little experiment in Europe has been amazing for me. Yeah, I think it's a tough one because the prices are, like, it's hard to get a gauge on what the prices are going to be like. Like, are the European guys at a huge discount? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily if they're at a discount. Again, we've learned our lessons very, very painfully over the years that you should never make assumptions about where prices are going to go. So I don't think you're buying these players to be like, oh, I'll be able to sell them for double in 4 months. It's more about right now. If you just take a look at some of the players that you can buy for the beef that you have, are you better to go for a proven Sorare champion rather than spending that money on MLS, where, as we know, there's absolutely no guarantees. There's not, apart from maybe Carlos Heel, there's not really anyone you can buy where you're like, I'm confident it'll do well.
Yeah, and I think I got to look at super rare, like sell-on value as well. My worry with America is it's all about form. At the moment, if their form is going really well, then yes, they'll be valued really highly. But because they're no names, and especially in a super rare division, as soon as those scores drop off, their prices go pretty drastically with it as well.
Yeah, I would say on that front, because that was something that I definitely took into account when I made the move to go pretty much entirely super rare. I was like, people don't buy super rares; they're very hard to sell. My strategy is very much, I'm going to invest the ETH that I have in hopefully some really high quality super rares that potentially have at least 2-3 years of utility that I can use to win. And then those things that I win, I'm in a position to either try and trade them for high value rares or sell them at a pretty substantial discount, knowing that, I got it for free anyway because it was a reward. So I'm not buying players thinking, oh, will I be able to sell this on in a year or so? It's more about, is this card going to be able to win me more rewards? And I think that's what you should be thinking about with your super rare purchases. Not necessarily what's the sell-on value, but how much can I squeeze out of this super rare over the next couple of years.
What's the difference in terms of winning rewards in Champ America than that of All-Star Rare Pro? Because obviously what I've really enjoyed about the fact in All-Star is I can sort of combine the best of every league. You know, I can combine those European guys with some of the attacking guys from the MLS. And that's something I think works really well. Yes, it's impossible to win really high cards, but is it better to target those smaller divisions and put all your eggs in one basket? And that's where, if it all happens for you, that's when you can win a star.
I think you might have that flipped. I mean, the prize pools in America and like the regionals, obviously, you know, you can't win the best cards. You know, the best you can get is a Carlos Heel. You know, that's the best, maybe a Thiago Almada. But the stars just aren't as good as All-Star.
But they're easier to achieve, though.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think it's more, you mentioned like, that 1 week where it all comes together. When it all comes together, you want your boys in All-Star Rare Pro or All-Star Rare, because if it all comes together, chances are if you come 12th in All-Star Rare Pro, the card you get is most likely going to be more valuable than the card you win if you win America Rare Pro. Like, it's like a good example. Like a friend of mine, he came second in America Rare Pro a few weeks ago, and he won a Sebastian Jerisi, which is great, like great card, you know, worth about half an ETH at the moment. But his score would have put him like 4th in All-Star Rare Pro, and I think 4th got like Mike Magnan or something. So it was like, you know, it all came together, but his players were in America, and then the upside is pretty severely limited. So I think during the off season, maybe yes, focus on America, because otherwise you got to compete with all the Asian scores. But you know, you've got Sho Sasaki in your squad. You know, maybe you're better to just try and combine the best of Asia and the best of America, and try and just smash All-Star Rare Pro. The other benefit, of course, with All-Star and All-Star Rare Pro is you win ETH if you finish in the top 100 or whatever it is, top 300. So like, there's that carrot as well.
Yeah, and I think I've got to stop looking at it from the lens of All-Star Rare, because even when the stars align and everything happens and everything's perfect, I mean, the guy that won this week was 500 plus points. Like, the stars can align and you're still, like, you're not guaranteed a star. Like, that's the reality. That's how tough it is. Whereas Rare Pro, I think, because you're investing that higher capital, you've got a bit more of a chance to get a good card in return.
Yeah, that's it. Speaking of winning good cards, I think it's time we check in on our underdogs, our Wolfsburg boys.
And here for underdog.
I don't know if I'm on talking terms with our Wolfsburg boys at the moment, Alistair.
Mate, that pin is just it's I can't even remember what it looks like now. I've lost it in my mind's eye. The pin is so far away. It feels like we're never going to get to that $15.95 pin. I mean, it's soul crushing. Basically, look, Patrick Wimmer was a bad boy this week. Got suspended. I didn't realize he was suspended. Popped him in the lineup. He didn't play because of the suspension, of course. 10 minutes into the game, Cohen steals, makes a mistake, error led to goal. Everything's looking terrible. You know, our special boy, Paulo Ottavio.
He's my special boy.
You know, credit to him. You know, slightly different jersey, slightly different score. Everyone else is kicking in yellows. He's dicking in. He's banging in a dark green. 95 points from our boy Paul Ottavio, but everyone else basically sucked major eggs. So, look, Wolfsburg are making it very hard to love them right now. I've set fire to my Volkswagen out in the parking lot. Things are not looking good.
At what point do we have to ride or die this Wolfsburg team? Like, what's the go? Because how many cards have we won off them? Like 1, 2? Like, it's been a nightmare.
We've won one card worth 98 cents, but 15 more of them, and we're pretty much close to getting that pin. So we should get there by the mid 2030s. But look, to answer your question, I will die with this Wolfsburg stack. They will be buried with me. They'll be printed out on A4 cardboard and shoved into my coffin with me. Come on, it's our boys. It's the underdogs.
It's the underdog. I mean, the concept, when we came up with the underdogs concept, we were like, this is the best idea ever. We'll win enough so we can go watch them in the flesh. And we're like, we got someone good enough that we're like, hey, we could be on the chance. Like, this is a Bundesliga team. Tell you what, all those other options that were on the list are looking pretty damn tasty right now. But the boys in green, like you said, we got to stick by them.
It's time for Wolfsburg Fact of the Week.
Fact of the week, Wolfsburg. Okay, so obviously we know Wolfsburg, very closely linked with Volkswagen. All the players work there part time. The mascot used to be a car, but fun fact: in the early to late 90s, at VFL Wolfsburg games, Volkswagen were very generously giving out free cars to random members of the crowd at Wolfsburg games. So obviously, as you can imagine, like, crowd attendances are going through the roof. They're like, have you heard about this? You can win a free car. All you got to do is rock up to the game. Every week they're pulling out 5 people from the crowd, 5 lucky Germans. It was all going really well. Everyone's loving it. And then look, the first kind of batch of winners started to receive their cars, in the mail. The cars arrived. It turns out that the cars didn't have any bloody engines in them. And look, they weren't very happy. They said, look, Volkswagen, you've given us a car here with no engine. They said, well, look, it's a car, isn't it? Said, well, yes, technically. But there's no engine. They said, well, look, you should be able to get one secondhand or, take one out of your other car. Anyway, I reached out to Wolfsburg for comment and they basically just left me on hold for ages.
Wow. Because, I mean, there's nothing we love more than a car that's parked in the garage that you can't move, car parked on the street that everyone has to go around constantly. I thought for a second they might have, like in NBA games where they shoot the shirts out of those little cannons into the crowd. Thought they might have just been, like, cannoning Volkswagen cars into the crowd. I would have rocked up to a Wolfsburg game to watch that. Just saying.
Who's ready in the back row?
It's like when people get hit by stray balls at soccer games or baseball, but it's actually just a flying Volkswagen.
Yeah, I mean, the highlights reel was insane during the 90s. So yeah, look, Volkswagen, Wolfsburg, look, pretty poor form there from the boys, but you got to do what you got to do to get those tickets through the door.
Now, I mean, I think it's easy to say that Wolfsburg, they need a rebuild. We need a rebuild. And that brings us to our biggest talking point of today, and it's discussing your rebuild. I mean, last week you dropped a Volkswagen car flying through the stands bomb on us that all the rare cards were gone. Goodbye, Carlos Hill. Goodbye, Cecina. And welcome in the Blue Boys. Now, I think it's important to sort of talk through your strategy. How did you sort of go about starting from scratch, essentially, and some of the thought process behind all that?
Okay. So, actually, funnily enough, the thing that hurts me the most is not losing my Carlos Hill or my Cecina. It's actually losing all the, backup goalkeepers that I've held for, 3 years, waiting for them to get their go. I just was thinking the other day, I saw Ryan Mira, the backup for the New York Red Bulls, and check this guy out on Transfermarkt. He's basically been the backup at New York his entire career. He's done nothing else. He was in the Ireland under-21s team. He's now 32. He's spent his entire career sitting on the bench for New York. I don't think he's played any games for 4 years. So. And I had his record, and I was just waiting for that day, where Ryan gets the call up. But alas, it will never happen. Okay, back to my strategy. So
it'd be amazing if next week Mamira is announced in the Red Bull starting lineup.
It's gonna hurt me deeply, Ryan. Okay, so yeah, look, my strategy basically revolved around. I had some okay super rares. I had I'd picked up some pretty decent pieces along the way. Pedro Gay in goal. I had Sho Sasaki, which is probably my pride and joy. Shin Jin Ho, who will come at some point, I'm sure. But the bottom line is I had some okay pieces, but I never felt confident enough to put them into All-Star Super Rare. I was always like, my best case scenario here is like a tier 4, tier 5. So as a result, I was purely focusing on Rare Pro, doing pretty well, but always just struggling to compete a little bit. So my thinking was, I'm just a couple of really solid super rares away from like having a pretty decent all-star super rare team. And if I can roll that out each week and, hopefully obviously win some high tier super rares, but at a worst case scenario, try and pick up some tier 4s, tier 5s that I can then roll out into a Cat 240 team, then, by building depth, I should be able to realistically hit that threshold most weeks. Obviously, it's not that easy, but you need depth to do it, and it can be done. Meanwhile, I'm competing in a division that's just not quite as competitive as others. I'm not thinking that I'm going to win All-Star Super Rare. Some of the big whales out there have just got ridiculous galleries, but I thought if I can put together 5 players where I'm confident they'll do the business most weeks, then I'm in a good spot. So the way I worked it out, and this is, I guess, what we'll talk about, is not so much looking at super rares, but looking at just general lineup and roster construction. So, like, what do I look for when I'm putting together whether it's one team or a whole gallery? So I already had some okay keepers. I think keepers don't really matter so much. The only things I would say that you do need to make sure you've got is someone who's just absolutely locked in. Like, I think it's been said on a podcast, but if you're going out to buy a keeper, you've been burnt with this before yourself, spend a little bit extra, get the guy who's locked in, get the guy who hasn't missed a game in 3 years, get the guy who the backup is Ryan Mira. Like, get that guy, Carlos Coronel of the New York Red Bulls is 100% locked in, first name on the team sheet. Ryan Mira is not coming anywhere near him. You'd be better off to spend the extra ETH and get him as opposed to getting someone like Luis Barraza at New York City, where there's his backup is just as good as him, and you can't say with any certainty he's going to be in the team long term.
Exactly right. And like, as tempting as the 35-year-old goalkeeper from Argentina is, that's 0.2, it's just, like you said, it's just not worth it, because one injury, and they could be done, unless they break out to make an incredible recovery. But B, like you said, I think I use my favourite boy of all time, Buttery Joe Willis. Last year, he had a horrible run. I think he had like 3 or 4 error leads to goal in 5 games, a shocking run, and rightfully was dropped. But of course, the coach came out and was like, look, Joe's our guy. I think it was the first time he'd missed a minute for Nashville in years. And the backup was some guy who wore headgear and was a nobody. Had that been some guy of substance, then look, Joe might not have got to look back in, because it is hard. If the substitute goalie comes in, keeps a couple of clean sheets, and then, then it's theirs to lose. The fact that it was Pantomis, whatever his name was, it allowed Joe to come back in the fold. And I think I cannot stress that enough, and agree with you more on that point of the backup. Who the backup is so important.
Yeah, that's right. So I think I'm still on the lookout for a good quality, solid keeper, but I've got enough keepers now to see me through for a while. Then it came to defenders. Now I'm a big fan of defenders. I think defenders and you've experienced this lately with, if you've got a consistent defender that can score big for you week in, week out, it just makes life so much less stressful than trying to rely on your midfielders and your forwards. So what was I? So yeah, when I'm looking at defenders, I want those guys who've got a really high kind of floor. And now what I try and do, I actually quite like running 2 defenders in a team. I like running one who's a centre back typically, who has really good AA scores every week. And then I also like to pair them with someone who maybe they're more of a left back, right back, if you can get one that takes set pieces, that's just like crucial, especially if you're looking at super rares for Rare Pro or for All Star Super Rare, because the guys who take set pieces, they're the ones who can hit your hundreds. They're the ones that can roll out a good AA game, get an assist. I think the guy who won All Star Rare this week, his left back got 3 assists. So players like your Julian Gressels, your Kieran Trippiers, Maxi Widak at Vitesse is an example of one that's a bit cheaper. He's probably a bit more of a boom or bust kind of player, but I think if you can look for those defenders that are decisive capable as well, they're just like absolute gold, and you should really be trying to focus on getting some of them into your team if you want to win.
I'm winning.
Rather than focusing on the big names in the mids and the forwards.
I agree with like you touched on, I love the double defender combo. I think also the fact that you get the clean sheet bonus when they do get a clean sheet, like that's halfway to them getting a decisive on their own. If they've pumped out a pretty good AA score and then they keep the clean sheet on top of that, that can turn you from a light green to a dark green pretty quickly.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that kind of brings us on to the midfielders. So when I'm looking for midfielders, I typically want, again, I want a midfielder who's got a strong all-around kind of base score. Your CDMs, your CMs often will have that. But the problem with those kind of more defense-minded midfielders is that they often don't have those peak scores. And as we know, you need those peak scores if you want to try and compete. And you can go down the kind of flashier route with like a Lucas Zelarayan is a good example, or João Mario, where look, if they're scoring goals and getting assists, then you beauty, you're on for a 90 or 100. But if they go through a bit of a poor run of form, all of a sudden you're stuck with your 40s, your 30s and 40s. So I like to look for the ones who play more of a defensive role but have set pieces. Again, most of this comes back to set pieces. They're just so important, and I'll show you a few ways to find those players shortly. But if you've got Jack Price is obviously a dirty word right now, but back in the day when Jack Price was the king of Sorare, he was a perfect example of a player who, gets lots of attempted assists, gets lots of assists because he's on all corners, he's on all free kicks, and he's getting through a high work rate in the midfield, finding passes, making tackles, that kind of thing. So I like to, go with a bit of relative, a bit of safety there in the midfield if you can. But obviously it can be hard to try and strike that balance. You do need those players that can hit your 80s and 90s, relatively regularly.
And I know you'll touch on forwards in a second, but what are your thoughts on forwards that have midfielder cards?
Always stay away from any forward that has a midfielder card where they actually play as a forward, because
You're gonna have a bad time.
Because you lose points every time they concede a goal, and you also lose points when they lose possession. And if you're a forward, you should be just taking shots and taking chances. You shouldn't be worried about holding on to possession. So so many people fall into the trap of they go, oh, I'll pick up a Droisi, and then they pick up his midfielder card, and it's just
You're gonna have a bad time.
Just not as good. Some players worse than others, but I think if there's a player who is an actual forward in the real game, and you can pick up their forward card, I think it's always better. So forwards is a tricky one. I think ideally you want a forward that can get good AA, but ultimately you want goals. Again, comes back to set pieces. If they take pens, you're always in with a shot of a goal. And I always think that when you're looking for a forward, you got to go to leagues like your Eredivisie, maybe the Jupiler League, some of those leagues basically where most weeks it's going to be strong team versus weak team, the farmers leagues, because, look at like the most successful forward on the game, Dusan Tadic, plays for Ajax, scores a goal, gets an assist pretty much every week because Ajax are going to score 4 or 5 most weeks, whereas, look at like the MLS, you can't really say with any certainty that any of those forwards are going to score each week. It's always more just a hit and hope kind of strategy. So if you can, again, spend a little bit more, get a locked in forward at a club that dominates each week, technically, I think the ones that are a little bit older are typically a bit better because you don't have that risk of them, moving to Chelsea and warming the bench. But yeah, definitely keep an eye out for those kind of elder statesmen that just bang in goals every week and take advantage of the farmer leagues.
I think for me, a forward is the most important and crucial card. I think the hardest card to source because, like you said, it is very hard to find a forward that has good AA, and like they're so hit and miss that if they don't score a goal, like as they showed this week, no goal from your forward, and any chance of a half decent card's pretty much gone. So I like if you can find them those forwards that do have the good AA, so that if they don't score a goal, they're at least still getting you at least 50. Can go a long way.
100%.
And I've also think I've worked out something you said before about. I was just going to say with Droisi, you brought him up before. I actually remember at a freak out that Droisi's worth 0.5. That'd be his midfielder card that's worth 0.5. You could probably sell his forward card for more, right?
Yeah, if anything, it's actually a great thing that they've made him a midfielder card because now your forward card is much more rare. If they make another forward card, then all of a sudden you're sitting on hen's teeth. So yeah, definitely good for you for sure.
Suck at everyone else.
I'll just take a moment to let everyone know here that right now it is about 5:45 in Australia, which is why at the start of the episode I was all well lit and sunny, and
Daytime!
now I'm very dark.
Nighttime.
Serious. It's because it's nighttime now.
Having a game of nighttime, daytime. You want to play?
Thanks for letting us know, mate. You look terrifying. The shadow just keeps getting further.
I know that I can just hear the listeners at home just panicking, just being, why? What's happening? Has there been a murder?
But not me, mate. Look, I'm beautifully well lit and shiny, as always.
As always, yeah, the shiniest forehead in sports.
I'm going to come back next week with a friend.
All right. So, look, to summarise, I think when I'm putting together my team, and I'll kind of basically I'll run you through my all-star super rare team that I will run out, pending injuries. I've got Gaese in goal, 100% locked in, always going to be the starter. He plays for like a mid-level team, so he's going to face some shots. He may not keep a clean sheet every week. When he does, he's getting 80. And when he doesn't, he's always, thereabouts that 45, 50 mark. So he doesn't kill you like the Ajax keeper concedes. He's getting 30, So Gaese in goal. I've got Kieran Trippier, which is the purchase that I brought in once I'd kind of got that ETH freed up. Set piece taker at Newcastle, gets good AA, hits hundreds pretty regularly. Like, dream super rare to have, really, for me. Should have had an assist on the weekend. Now, my mid is... I am on the hunt for a really quality mid. At the moment, my mid is Daniel Wass. He plays in Norway or Sweden, one of the Norse countries. Now, I could go and find some star power there, but Daniel Wass is one where he plays kind of a defensive mid role. He will score 55 to 60 at least every week. But the crucial thing for him is he takes all sets, so all corners, all free kicks. He was on pens until recently, but they signed some new striker, so that's a bit of a bummer. But he's always in with a sniff of an assist, and if he gets that assist, he's hitting 80 or 90. Last night he actually committed an error led to goal, but he still managed to score like 52 points because his AA was 33 or 35. So I'm actually quite happy having him in there as a super rare because it's like, I know what I'm going to get. I've got high upside, very low downside. And that's another good example of like, he's probably not going to be worth much. His price is going to keep going down, but he does the job just as well as, a lot of other super rares that I could buy for 3 or 4 ETH. I've got Darwin Quintero up front. He's old. He could break down at any minute, but this is a good example of like, he plays for a dominant team. He gets good AA. I think he hasn't scored under 50 for the last, couple of months. And he's always got a chance of scoring a goal or getting an assist because his team just thrashes these poor these poor fellas from the wide stretches of Colombia. He just comes in every week and just knocks them around. It's quite cruel to see, but it's good for my Sorare team.
I mean, for him, it's more about just making sure he's not at some festival over the weekend and he's unavailable due to his child's birth or something, or...
That's it. Yeah, you've got to really keep a close eye on his Instagram. But when he makes it to the ground, he's on fire. And then finally, I've got my boy Sho Sasaki. I mean, he's my Mr. Consistent. Like, I know what he's going to do each week. He's not the most decisive, capable, but he just does what he does. He's a 70 every week. He's safe. He's safe. So that's my kind of team. And the way I looked at it is like, if those guys all do what they should do each week, then I'm hitting a tier 4, tier 5. And if one or two of them, or hopefully all of them, hit that upside, then I'm right up there. So
Like that's ever gonna happen.
so that's kind of the way I looked at it. Hopefully that helps people kind of, if they're looking at creating their own team, how to look for those players. I will just say, like, a couple of ways to find, especially like the set piece takers. I'll share my screen here. Because this is what I do pretty much every time I'm doing some scouting. So a good place to start is you can look at, say, a whole league. So you can look at the Bundesliga. If you can't find it that way, then just search for a team. Munich, München. It's going to be München. Yeah, cool. All right. Borussia Dortmund. No.
6.5 hours later.
Oh, God. There we go. Okay. Shit. Alrighty. So if you go to a team or you can go to a player, it doesn't really matter. You can either look at VfL Wolfsburg or you can look at the entire league. So if you looked at the entire league here, click on Bundesliga. Now you can look at last 5, last 15, last 40, and you can basically see who's got the most assists, who's the top goal scorer, who plays the most minutes. Of course, it's important to make sure you get players who play all the time. And then you can see who the top kind of free kick scorers, free kick assisters, penalty kick takers, corner takers. And you can kind of just go through this list and be like, right, okay, Max Arnold, he takes corners for Wolfsburg. All right, that's his price. He scores pretty well. And then if you look at the actual Wolfsburg team, you can see that Maxi Arnold pretty much does everything. Like, takes pens, takes free kicks, takes corners. So bang, there is like a prime example of a player that I want to have in my team, because you've always got a pretty good chance of a decisive. If there's a decisive on the pitch, he's more than likely involved in it. So he, for example, is a much better option in midfield than, say, like Kaminsky, because Kaminsky does none of those things. You're just hoping that he kind of is involved in the goal somehow. So so that's a pretty good way to find players. You can also do that with like defenders as well. The other way is to look at the player rankings for a particular league or a particular team. So you might go, right, let's go Jupiler League, might say defenders. Now, if you want to try and find that defender that has that high kind of upside, that gets assists, gets decisives, then you can actually filter by decisive score. So the average decisive score. So if you look at it over the last 40, the top is like Daniel Munoz, Maxim de Kuiper. I'm sure if you looked into most of these, you'd find that they usually take sets. So like someone like Daniel Munoz, he obviously, is either scoring goals or is getting assists quite frequently, and he's got a pretty good AA. Therefore, that's someone that I'm like, he's what I want in my team, because he's got a good ceiling and a good floor.
And then from there, you can just go with and do your due diligence of, for example, if they're getting a move or things like that, pretty much.
Yeah, of course. Don't go and buy someone just based on this, but it's just a good place to start if you're making a bit of a short list. And like I said, if you go through that process of each position and going, right, well, what characteristics am I looking for in each position? Another example, if you're looking at mids, let's just go all leagues, and you're like, right, well, I agree with Ali. I want to have a mid that has a high floor, and potentially has that high ceiling. You can look at their AA scores, and you look. I mean, Kimmich, obviously, great example of a good player. But you look down that list, like Parejo, Wendell, Zaruki. Like, these are all midfielders that have high ceilings and high floors as well. Zaruki is one of the players I bought in most recently, and you can see here, even without a decisive, he's banging in 70s. And if he gets a decisive, then all of a sudden you're up in those really dark greens. So, great example of the perfect midfielder in my opinion.
Yep. Wow, it's really making me regret owning my Jamiro Monteros and Emmanuel Reynoso, who's off in jail at the moment. I want to get in on some of these AA boys.
Yeah, make sure you check if they're potentially going to jail for pistol whipping someone.
I just wanted to just quickly, I know we're going to move on to the next section, but I was well aware of that, and it had been so long that we were like, oh, look, this was an issue a year ago. He'll be fine. He'll be fine now. I got 2 games of use out of him, and now he's going to go to... anyway, look.
Yeah, come on, Emmanuel. Just pick up the phone. And be like, look, I'll be honest, I'm in Bermuda.
Yeah.
I've just had my 4th pina colada for the day. I'll be back when I'm back. But I think he's, I don't know. I'm sure he'll end up playing in Brazil or something.
All right. So I think to move on, is there anything else you want to add further to your super rare lineup builder discussion?
No, look, I don't think it's necessarily about super rares. I think just in general, I think those are good rules to live by when you're scouting and trying to find that, trying to put that lineup together. Again, it's not that I'm winning every single week, but in theory, I should be. And that's what matters. It's not about reality. It's about what goes on up here and in here.
I mean, if you'd been listening to your own advice, you probably would be winning every week, because just to recap some of your buy lows that we've had in previous weeks, had you bought them when you were talking about them on the podcast, you'd probably be a millionaire by now.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Basically, my buy low record has just been phenomenal this season. Jean Mota, one of the best midfielders in the MLS. Julian Gressel, maybe one of the best defenders on the entire platform. He could have been picked up for pretty cheap not that long ago. Klaus was one that we identified as a sell high, and he hasn't scored a goal since. So look, we're on a bit of a roll. I do realise that we're kind of running low on time, so I will go through the buy lows, sell highs. We'll make a bit of money for everyone out there.
2 words: entrepreneurship.
Listen carefully, because as we know, this could completely change your life.
I hope it doesn't sound arrogant when I say that I am the greatest man in the world.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, we've rambled on a lot today, but okay. The 3 that I've picked up for us this week that you can still pick up relatively cheap. First one, if you're in the market for a keeper, Jonathan Bond at the LA Galaxy. He's currently injured, and I know that is a danger, because sometimes people, they sprain a finger and then you never see them again. Thomas Hassel. But I think Jonathan Bond is like one of the best players on the Galaxy. They suck right now. They're just letting in goals. They shipped 3 against Houston over the weekend, so things aren't looking great. I think they probably need him back ASAP. From all accounts, his injury is not that serious, and you can pick up his rare for like 0.2 at the moment. So I think there's a real opportunity to pick up a starting goalkeeper for the off season if you're happy to wait, potentially just a couple more weeks.
I mean, I might be getting myself a Bond at that rate. Take him over Steve.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be a bad shout. The next one I've got on the list is actually one that you could probably look at picking up. We were talking earlier about European bargains that you can pick up now that still have a bit of utility that you could potentially use next year. Wendell from Zenit. I mean, this is a guy who was one of the most expensive cards on the platform. I think he's currently going for like 0.2, 0.25. I know there's been a few little rumors about him moving on to other clubs, but he's just re-signed until 2027. Let me get him up here. Just re-signed until 2027. He plays for Zenit, they don't finish until like mid-June. So, you basically, you've got another 2 months of utility out of him. Had a couple of rough scores here, and I think everyone just kind of went a bit of cold on him. But I mean, it's Wendell. Like, look at those scores, and you can pick him up for under 0.3 ETH at the moment. So, I don't know. That just seems ridiculous to me.
And how often do you see a player go straight from the Russian league to that of the Premier League or something like that? So, I mean, odds are he stays.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like I said, he just re-signed a new deal. He seems to be happy. So, yeah, I think that could be a real. It's always a bit of risk with Russia, but yeah.
Some would say Russian roulette.
Some would say that.
Thank you.
Not me though. The last one we've got here for our buy lows is Mark Anthony Kay. Now, this is one where if his price wasn't so low, I would probably say he's a sell high because I don't know if he can necessarily maintain this level of scoring. But for 0.07, if he can keep it up and he kind of continues to crush in that midfield for Toronto that he had like he has so far this season, apart from that one pretty shocking game there against Columbus, he's cracked 80 most weeks. Again, probably not one that I would get in if I'm looking to roll out a team of absolute smashes because I don't know if I can trust it. But if you're just starting out or you're trying to hit threshold, he's at 15's only 51 right now. So, yeah, it could be an absolute bargain at 0.07.
I think the 51 L15 is the key one there. Perfect for two.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be like that for very long. But if he keeps scoring the way he is, then I can definitely see his price going up. So it could be one that you could just flip on.
And what about some sell highs? Who are some guys that flicking on?
Yep, so some sell highs. So the first one, I'm sure everyone's heard of this guy over the last couple of weeks. Aidan Morris has been absolutely crushing it for Columbus. I don't think he can withstand these scores. They are pretty incredible. Obviously, 2 goals there, a goal there. He's scoring very well, from an AA point of view, which is very promising. But this is kind of what he did last season, when he was a starter, And Columbus, they do look a lot better, but I don't know if I've got faith that they can maintain it. He's not going to score a goal every week. And I think for 0.214, if you can get anywhere near that for him, I think that, I think you can put that 0.214 to much better use.
It's that speed kit, mate. It's that black speed kit. It's unleashed a new monster inside Aidan Morris.
That's it. He's really fast now. He's faster than ever. All right. Next guy on my sell high list is another MLS youngster, John Tolkien. Big fan of John. He's always got cool hair. He's always mixing it up. He's a trendy Wendy. We love him. He's scoring really well. He's injured at the moment, but apart from that, he's scoring really well. He fits all the bills. He is a defender who is involved in all set pieces. I mean, that's what you want, right? That is what you want, and I think that's what mid-table Serie A teams also really want. And I think come June, July, he will be out the door, and he'll be playing for some rubbish team, and he will be dead. So I think you've only got a small window where you can get this kind of money for him. So as much as I love him, I think unless you think, John Tolkien's going to be the best player ever over the course of the next 5 years, I would be shipping him out because we've seen this story way too many times. Promising young MLS youngster becomes absolute dribble fodder over in Europe.
What?
Yeah, and I think, like you touched on, those scores, a lot of them, we see this every year. I think Jan Grey Goose was probably the best example of 2022, where he like flew out of the gates. I know you bought him. Everyone was like, holy, who's this tall-necked guy from San Jose? And then just nothing.
Yeah. I think ultimately you got to look at these players and go, what has changed? Why are they scoring so well? I think in the case of Aiden Morris, a few lucky goals. Yes, he's had some good AA games, but yeah, I don't know. And like I said, Anthony Kay, if he was double the price that he is now, he would be a sell high for me, 100%. But at his price currently, it's probably worth taking a punt in case he does keep it up.
Yeah. Look, I think we should probably wrap up here before you just become one big shadow. You're getting darker and darker with every passing second. That was terrifying. So before we scare any of the kids watching, I think we wrap up there. As always, mate, great content from you. I love the new you, the new hair, the new gallery. It's made things exciting once again. I can't wait to see how you go each weekend. And look, maybe one day you'll be as good as me. We'll see.
I'm slowly getting there. Week by week, I'm just aspiring. I've been polishing my forehead all week. I've been making questionable captaincy decisions. I want to be you, and one day maybe I will be my younger brother. Cool. Well, look, I'm looking forward to seeing what you win tomorrow. Last week, just for those who are playing along, you won a Raheem Sterling, which is pretty exciting. So keen to see what Premier League player with who's lost their former glory you win tomorrow.
Yeah, it was very cool winning someone that was like, oh, we know who that is. I still haven't been able to sell him, but yeah, it was cool. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not too sure what the tier 3s are going to be like this week. It's like normal lower end of tier 2, what it used to be. So fingers crossed. I could do with
fingers crossed we have another Sorare bug.
I should do with a midfielder. Yeah, get the best tier 5 in history, Mario Hermoso.
Yeah, all right. Let's aim for that nice juicy midfielder with a high floor and a potential high ceiling. Potentially on set pieces, and you're on to a winner.
No question about it. I am ready to get hurt again.
Amazing. All right, thanks again. Catch you next week. Best of luck for the weekend.
See you, mates.